The January 2008 issue of Aviation Week carried an article based on interviews with the woman who oversees some of the most provocative current DARPA research. Dr. Amy Cruz began serving as a tech consultant to DARPA's director immediately after receiving her doctorate in neuroscience from the University of Illinois. Now she is in charge of some of the agency's literally most mind-boggling research. Among the items now on her plate, research into computer analysis of brain waves detected from satellites without the subject's knowledge. It's expected to help intelligence analysts precisely identify and locate targets based on the hostile thoughts of enemy forces, and to help leaders in the theater of operations know if their deployed troops are alert enough to realize the intensity of whatever situations they're about to face. Experiments have been run with soldiers whose brain waves are seen by their commanders via wireless computers. When a commander knows a soldier has gone into tunnel vision from information overload, he will know that he has to count on someone else for key actions and commands during an attack. An earlier project, called Augmented Cognition, AugCog for short, gave birth to something Cruz is working on currently. That is the Neurotechnology for Intelligence Analysts, NIA program. Phase 2 of the NIA project began recently. Honeywell's work is being augmented with participation from Teledyne Scientific Imaging and from Columbia University, which is aggressively building its neuroscience reputation. Phase 3 is expected to produce a prototype that intelligence agencies will road test. According to Honeywell, the technology is nearly ready for operational use. Altogether, AugCog and NIA research has linked several corporate and academic teams with the 4 different military services: Daimler Chrysler with the U.S. Marine Corps, Lockheed Martin with the Navy, Boeing with the Air Force, and Honeywell's team of some 11 industry and university partners with the Army. One of the most brain-twisting and talked-about areas of recent research, for instance, is something called the Active Denial System, or ADS, which was demonstrated in late January 2007 at Moody Air Force Base in Georgia. ADS is the byproduct of larger ongoing research looking for technology that could delete and then replace a person's memories. That last sentence is guaranteed to make any true science fiction fan remember at least 3 recent mainstream movies with variations on the same theme. Another on-the-horizon reality actually seems like a direct lift from science fiction, specifically from Minority Report. And in Science Fact, a team of neuroscientists has actually developed a brain scan-based way of finding hints about what a subject is intending to do. The scientists built their research on findings from earlier studies that used fMRI to understand what goes on in the human brain when the topic at hand is racial prejudice, violence, or lying. In the March 6, 2008 edition of Nature, scientists from the University of California, Berkeley, reported development of a method for decoding patterns in visual areas of the brain and using them to know what a subject is looking at. The scary potentials of this announcement are easy to conjure. By exposing subjects to visual images and then recording brain activity, the UC Berkeley researchers first figured out a number of activation patterns. Then they built a mathematical model, an algorithm. Information from the patterns makes it possible for the researchers to look at brain activation and then make a well-informed guess about what kind of visual information has caused it to happen. Moreno's 1999 book, Undue Risk, compiled all he could gather about secret experiments sanctioned in the name of defense. Moreno reports that Department of Defense has around $68 billion to use annually on scientific research and development. The slice of the Pentagon's black operations budget that is earmarked for research and development he estimates at $6 billion or more. At the end of a 2001 Dana Foundation conference on neuroethics, held in San Francisco, Moreno found himself raising his hand in front of 100 neuroscientists to ask, "How come no one here said anything about how this applies to national defense?" He left the conference determined to start learning about what was happening regarding possible applications of neuroscience in defense circles. First, he contacted friends who were neuroscientists. No one would speak on the record. They all either were receiving DARPA funding or very much wanted to. But a few were willing to speak off the record, and they helped him get a general sense of some directions being pursued. Next, he Googled DARPA and neuroscience. Thousands of pages appeared. A 2008 search registered 152,000 hits. Many of those pages were RFPs, which stands for Requests for Proposals. These documents ask military contractors to say if they are able to build certain devices DARPA wants to have, and also ask how much time and funding they would need. By mentally translating these RFPs from military speak to English, Moreno learned more about what DARPA was hoping to achieve. So we are now in an arms race to create the next generation of unimaginably potent weapons, and also in a race to contain the current generation of destructive capacity. That generation may seem outdated, but it's still the most convincing display of instant human-created hell we've ever seen. Imagine an advanced version of Honeywell's image triage system. It includes group behavioral analysis software and individual emotion recognition algorithms that key off micro-emotional tics we all exhibit. Intelligence analysts and warrior athletes will scour real-time surveillance feeds from satellites, unmanned predators, robotic insects, and other ingenious surveillance systems in their efforts to seek and destroy enemy combatants. We will eventually see the rise of neuroweapons aimed at shifting the emotional and cognitive capacity of individuals and small populations. Memory bombs that give individuals short-term amnesia or electronic sleep-inducing weapons may seem in the realm of science fiction. But before the advent of atomic weapons, so was the idea that 140,000 inhabitants of Hiroshima, Japan, could be wiped off the face of the planet with a single bomb. As more and more biology and chemistry labs focus on developing next-generation brain drugs, other researchers working on a different piece of the neurotechnology revolution are designing implantable medical devices that interact with the brain through tiny electrical impulses. advancing nanotechnology manufacturing techniques will eventually shrink the size of the implantable devices. Surgeries to implant them will become less invasive. Over the next 2 decades, the impact of neuro devices will be profound. In one way, BCIs, computers either accept commands from the brain or send signals to it, for example, to restore vision. Two-way BCIs would allow brains and external devices to exchange information in both directions. As you heard in the previous chapter, there is tremendous interest among the defense community in developing this capability, and plenty of money to help make it happen. Like the gigantic shifts of humanity's past, our emerging neuro-society is a wild card. It holds enormous, seemingly equal promise for inducing an age of bliss or a living nightmare. The reason so much more is at stake in this epochal change is that our newest tools will give us nothing less than increasingly precise control over the most powerful factor in our lives, our own minds. Here is what I believe to be the overarching question. Does a citizen's right to privacy include his or her inner domain of thought? Depending on how we answer questions like these, the emerging technologies may be used to control us and keep us in cultural or economic bondage.
Falling is the first thing I feel. Distant voices echo inside my head. Their orders are clear, and yet all I can think about is the others. Remiel, Uriel, Amatiel, Ithuriel, Raphael, Michael. Each one traveled the same path. What was their fate? What awaits me on the other side? They have gone to a place where the light is cursed and darkness blinds the soul. This is a place where even angels fear to tread.
Take it. Close your eyes. Go on. Now, can you remember exactly how you felt that day? That's how I feel when I'm flying. Like that plane is a part of me. You know, it's like no matter how bad things get, there's something good out there, just over the horizon.
I could really feel it.
Yeah. Me too.
The cabal does not understand the ideas of love and compassion. Unfortunately, many of them will never understand until their next life. are some international groups located throughout your global communities who want to promote peaceful and diplomatic relations with the people of star nations. Every individual or groups of individuals have a right to interact with us, and this is our ultimate goal. Surely, citizen diplomacy is a very good place to start. The ultimate truth is that upon all of you now is the truth that you are part of us, and we are a part of you. Therefore, we are the same on many levels and different on many levels. It is time now to increase our sameness and to decrease our difference. This will require a profound acceptance and a great requirement in your heart. There is no rush to complete this transformation of yourselves. There is a rush to begin this transformation, because human society, if it stays on its current course, will fail self-destructively. It is expected that each individual will have a different response to our presence and arrival. So it is normal then that some individuals will be incapable of managing the presence of Stellan. These individuals should seek the comfort of those who understand Stellans, or of professionals in the fields of counseling, psychology, and clinical social work as examples. It is expected that some minds will not be able to cope for some time, and we may need medical attention. This is normal. You understand the needs of your body, and in moderation. You should ensure that you feel safe, comfortable, and maintain your mental health. For the majority of you, these symptoms will pass rapidly or eventually. It is possible that our presence in the skies, for whatever reason, the people in positions of power may conjure, may be seen as threatening. We make clear right now that we are peaceful races of beings from different planetary systems and dimensions, and any violence or disapproval originates from a human source of misunderstanding, misinformation, or simply ignorance. We hope that enlightened individuals can intervene and clarify the situation, thereby preventing large-scale mistakes. Humans of good conscience must now take a stand and undertake initiatives toward a future of peaceful coexistence. Further, we wish to inform you that the world you see today, including all the modern things, are in fact inferior and archaic things because they are based on an absence of spirituality, the central basis of life and this universe. So this said, life will get better. Already many of you are studying things such as yoga and meditation, philosophy, in order to find meaning and purpose in your lives that have become banal. Many of you are naturally seeking a more spiritual existence in a world filled with selfishness, corruption, greed, and fear. Also, we would like to assert that the Earth humans of egocentric authority, shadow government, cabal, Illuminati, are not to be trusted and have been the reason behind our separation from you all. They are a minority group. They have kept the truth of our presence and existence from you and have ignored and dismissed our requests for this information to be made public. That is, a full public disclosure. People will realize that their public and private governments have long known and had extensive contact with star nations. All of this knowledge has been kept from you. Example, the UFO cover-up. For many reasons. It is right and proper then to demand the gradual release of this knowledge, along with a public apology, in due time. It is also right for the people of the world to forgive these treasons and to use love and compassion as a way of moving forward. positions of power who are responsible for this cover-up should be automatically removed from their position and denied any position of influence. If they have broken laws, local or international, they should face a judicial court of law according to the region or country in which they are residents. All of these things must be handled with responsibility, manners, and intelligence, rather than haste, anger, and violence. We will not force you to act in any particular way, and we will always offer our love as to whatever path you choose. You must understand that this planet is your planet, and you must learn to govern yourselves. The reason we are here today is because it is time for all of you to base your decisions on the truth rather than on the lies that you have been fed for so many years. We hope that our presence as a symbol of truth will inject hope into the human heart. We hope that you will see our sincere intentions to connect with the citizens of Earth, planet, you. We respectfully remind you that this is a peaceful mission. We are peaceful societies from afar. We are not hostile. Should you witness any military attacks or other acts of aggression, it will originate from an Earth-based party, group, or individual. Remember that they do have some of our technology in their possession, including weather modification technology. The message is simple. Star nations are part of Earth's history, past, present, and future. We wish to reconnect with humanity in a productive manner that is consistent with high moral standards. This is the message and our intention. These things must not be twisted or distorted to fit rogue ideologies or militaristic tendencies. These things must remain clear. Let the spiritual leaders and enlightened individuals take a stand and express their hearts. Let courage govern your hearts and minds, and the idea of fear will fade away. Many of you refer to this as formal contact. So this is the ultimate goal, and we wish it to happen in the very near future when you are ready. Should there be acts of aggression from the human side, you will cause your own casualties. We do not wish this. Our mission to this planet is peaceful. Stellans are very Earth-oriented and regard this planet as a living planet. As some of you do, that needs care and attention, especially now. Some of Earth's changes will be structural and may be felt as earthquakes and weather changes, things of this nature. It is expected after so much abuse and neglect, so you must be prepared, as these things have been ongoing for the past several years. There will be no ending of the world, for that itself is based on fear. Instead, there will be an awakening, and in that process, the world you once knew will look different. It will be perceived differently, and you will also live differently. The Earth, too, being alive, will adjust, and this will cause some small catastrophes, but this is normal and is to be expected. It is an opportunity to work collectively as spiritual beings. Minority group cabal and its military allies around the world are keeping and using star beings as prisoners to further their acts of world domination. We would ask that these star beings, these prisoners Stellan, to be released without harm. That they in turn will not harm and will hold no grudge. Real starships of various designs may pass through your area or city, and you are welcome, even encouraged, to take photos or video images as you like. The ships remind all of humanity that Stellans are an integral part of your history and your future. Share acquire this knowledge and be proud to know that what you have seen is real. Do not be fooled by any imitations or cabal attempts to deny or obscure this truth. Be prepared for their attempts at distractions, be it a new flu, threat of biological attack, a new military engagement, or something really surprising. They are good at distractions. They are proficient with fear-based actions and conjuring imaginary enemies. The Star Nations will approve of any form of peaceful, compassionate, and insightful contact with humankind of any race, culture, or religion. It is time to embrace your true heritage at this pivotal moment in your short history. This is only the beginning.
Is fearless. Fearless is the job description. That isn't me.
So you're just gonna walk away again? Explain this to me, Hal. Please explain to me just once why.
Because I'm afraid.
You don't think your dad ever felt afraid?
If he did, he'd figure out some way to beat it.
Yeah, well, there's a word for that. Courage.
They said that the ring wouldn't have chosen me if it didn't see something. Something I don't see yet.
I see it. I always have. The ring didn't see that you were fearless. It saw that you had the ability to overcome fear.
Professor John Mack of Harvard University made a detailed study of people who claimed they had been abducted by aliens. In his book, John Mack studied abductees who said that the grey alien is actually a genetically engineered reptilian who invade planet Earth on a regular basis and collect human DNA as part of a plan to breed an alien-human hybrid race who will serve an extraterrestrial elite. According to Colonel Philip J. Corso, back-engineered alien technology is a jealously guarded secret by the rulers of mankind. The elite use the international network of secret societies to honor and control the government and military officials who work on secret projects for the elite. In fact, the oldest secret society known to mankind was formed in ancient Babylon and is called the Brotherhood of the Snake. The ruling elite of ancient Egypt fashioned their bodies so that they resembled aliens. All over ancient Egypt, serpents, snakes, and reptiles are associated with kingship and power over the human population. New kings had their bodies massaged with a special potion which contained crocodile fat. This was a worldwide cult of the crocodile, a reptilian species which has kept its original form since before dinosaurs walked on land. The crocodile is pictured alongside the Wangina creator spirits of Western Australia. Reptiles have always been associated with a race of hidden masters. Many occult traditions which are related to the birth of Freemasonry speak of the hidden masters. Some occult historians and authors claim that a group of hidden masters control world international Freemasonry. Ancient Masonic texts suggest that these hidden masters are in actual fact alien spirits from another world. Some Masonic texts say that the secrets of how to control and influence society and politics from behind the scenes was passed to the elite of Freemasonry from a race of reptilian aliens who invaded planet Earth and landed in ancient Iraq more than 12,500 years ago.
They were to be, like I say, the middlemen and women operating in visible light for the outside visible light control system. And it's appropriate that the caduceus and the symbol of the medical profession is the DNA, in effect, portrayed as two snakes. Because to these reptilian geneticists who were far, far ahead of where we are in the public arena in terms of genetics and understanding, the DNA is a software program. And so they manipulate it for their own means. And this is crucial to understand the world that we live in. One seriously important aspect to this DNA, this hybrid DNA I'm talking about, is that it has eliminated what we call empathy. The ability to decode the emotion of empathy. Empathy is the fail-safe mechanism of all behavior. If I can empathize with the consequences for others of my actions, that limits and balances my actions. If I have no empathy because I cannot empathize, then there are no limits. There is nothing that won't do. 3,000 dead on 9/11, who cares?
Hello, I'm Doran Ellen Bell Dotan, and after watching a video clip called OTH, Abraham's DNA, to which I will provide a link, and to which I am making this video a response, I was moved to say what I need to say herein. That video reiterates what I stated earlier in this video, that the Jewish IQ overall is between 107 and 117. My personal experience would be that it would be far closer to 117 overall, and perhaps even above that than it would be to 107. But I understand that there is a desire not to make too many waves among the Gentile world. However, there is a finding in that video that they state clearly and unequivocally, and so will I, tests over a period of 70 years show that the Jewish verbal aptitude is 123 on average. I read in the course of a research study that was conducted, they found that when they first found that the Jewish IQ was about 117, that would necessarily mean that among the Jewish population there were 7 times more individuals per capita who had an IQ of 140 than in any other human population. A verbal IQ of 123 on average would clearly put us off the human graph. It is an order of magnitude of intelligence greater than exists among any other human group. And whether you like it or not, those are the facts. This fact has many implications, and I'm going to discuss a few of them herein. First, as I've said in other videos, Hebrew is not translatable because Hebrew is not like any other language. It is an alphanumeric language. When one reads Hebrew, one is also calculating.
Who cares? That's what we're dealing with. And this is vital to get across. If we look at this information on the basis of thinking, I wouldn't do that, so they wouldn't do it, then we're going to miss the plot completely. Because that's not like that. No, you wouldn't do it. They would, and have no emotional comeback whatsoever. The reason for the interbreeding, the hybrid, is vibrational compatibility. These hybrids have a greater infusion of reptilian DNA than the general population, although we have a lot. And therefore, the resonance is sympathetic to the resonance of these entities operating just outside visible light. And through this resonant connection, like 2 radio stations talking to each other, the possessing entity outside of visible light can control the thoughts, actions, perceptions of the intermediary, the demigod. And of course, the theme of possession is as old as history, right up to the present day. We look at these people. All these pictures are by Neil Haig, by the way. Anything that looks like this. Great, great, great friend of mine, great artist. And this image symbolizes the fact that he looks at him with invisible light and he sees George Bush. Nothing else. What people don't see, because it's outside the frequency range of their decoding system, is there are entities around these people who are actually controlling these people's thoughts, actions, etc. A number of psychics have said to me around the world how they've seen people walking along the street or wherever, and then they've seen like an ethereal reptilian entity locking into these bottom 2 chakra points, the emotional level, one of them is, and floating around with them. And this is a kind of a good analogy. You know when there's scientists in a laboratory and they're trying to work with something that they can't touch because it's too dangerous, what they're working with will be in a tank, and they'll put gloves on, which allows them to be outside the tank, but to manipulate inside the tank. Well, that is a very good symbol of what I'm talking about. These Illuminati bloodlines, these hybrid bloodlines, operate like those gloves, operating inside this reality. And Neil symbolizes these Illuminati families with invisible light as this bearded man. Whenever you see him as we go along, that is symbolic of the Illuminati families, controlled beyond human sight by these reptilian entities. When the world started to recover from great geological catastrophes, which I'll come to in a second, there were areas of the world that stood out in terms of their abilities and potentials and advancement. These were some of them, and this area is particularly important to the bloodlines I'm talking about. The area that was once called Sumer, thousands of years BC and became Babylon. This is why Babylon comes up in the writings of these people so often. And it's Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers. They didn't invade Iraq just for oil or just for anything. They didn't invade it for one thing, but multiple things. But one reason they're so obsessed with Iraq is because to these bloodlines in control of the world today, this is a very significant, almost religious piece of land of historical importance to them. As Sumer and Babylon broke up, these bloodlines started going walkabout. They became the royal families of the world. And what do royal families claim? The right to rule because of the divine right to rule. The Chinese emperors used to claim the right to be emperor because of their genetic connection to the serpent gods. And this is a theme all across the world between the serpent gods and royalty. They became the aristocracy and the royal families, claiming the right to rule because of their DNA. Just down the bloody road from here, we have a head of state in Britain to this day who is only head of state because of her DNA. Head of state because of her DNA. I actually made a complaint, nothing happened to it, but I made a complaint to the Race Relations Commission, or whatever they call it. They said, if you see racism, report it. So I reported the royal family. I thought, well, I mean, you would. You would. Because they go, racism, we must stop racism. All these bloody politicians go, well, get down to Buckingham Palace then. You're saying you can only be head of state, not only if you're bloody white, effectively, but if you only come from the same bloody family. Ridiculous. Anyway, it's always been and it still is. And so these aristocratic and royal families moved on. Eventually, when the people started to rebel against overt royal control dictatorship, these families, some of them stayed in the royal families overtly, and there's still some around, like ours. But these families moved into politics, into banking, into business, and became the dark suit, but they still perceived themselves as royalty, as special because of this genetic connection to the serpent gods. And through the British Empire, the so-called Great British Empire, and the other European empires, as these bloodlines moved up into Europe from the Middle East, etc., they exported these bloodlines all over the world. And we saw them in power in what we call colonization. But there's two types of control. One has a finite life, one can go on forever until it's exposed. The one that has a finite life is a dictatorship that the people under dictatorship can see, touch and taste. Communism, fascism, apartheid. People know where they stand and eventually, therefore, they will rebel against it because they know what they're dealing with. The greatest form of control is a control you can't see. Prison without the bars. You can't see the bars because you'll just sit there. People do not rebel against not being free when they think they are. And that's the idea of replacing the colony control with another kind of control called freedom. So what happened is, as these colonies, like the United States as it became, etc., and all the others around the world, as they were given independence, what was left out in those countries were the bloodline, under different names, the secret society network that manipulates the bloodline agenda, and those countries have gone on being controlled ever since. But because they have the ability to have a vote every 4 or 5 years, they don't realize they live in a tyranny. And that's how it works, the prison without the bars, and until it's exposed, it'll go on forever. And so these kind of people, especially the Rothschilds, they are major, major players in this. They are the middlemen for the manipulation of this reality from these entities mostly outside of this reality. And what they've created is like a global transnational corporation. What you have with a corporation is you have a headquarters somewhere in the world, and then in each country you have subsidiary companies of that headquarters, that central point. And all the subsidiaries in the world carry out the policy of the central point. Well, what these Illuminati hybrid family networks have done is create exactly the same, but instead of companies, they are secret society networks. So you've got the center of the web in Europe, for historical reasons, at operational level anyway, places like London, not the British government, the secret society centre in London. In Rome is another one, the Roman Church, Rome and other points in Europe. And then in each country, you have families from the network in those countries whose job it is to run the networks that control that country's business, banking, politics, media, all of it. And so what you have is from this central point in Europe, the center of the web, all these different places and countries all over the world then impose on their country what is being dictated here. And that's why as I travel around the world, I see the same things being introduced in different countries at the same time, overwhelmingly justified by the same excuses. It's all a global network. It can be symbolized too as a web, like I say, with the Rothschilds real close to the spider, and all these different strands on the web are different secret societies, different semi-secret societies, transnational corporations, and all the rest of it. So when you see all these different names of these corporations that dominate the world in so many ways, and the pharmaceutical cartel and the oil cartel and all the rest of it, the biotech cartel, they're all different names or different masks on the same one face. And so you have this structure where outside of visible light, you have the reptilian control system, comes down through the Illuminati families, and they control the people in power to push the world in a certain direction. Another way of looking at it here. You see, all these different people, these fight among themselves and all the rest of it, though if it gets out of hand, they get sorted. So these sit on the top of all these different countries. They control these different areas of their societies, and the people are then played off against each other. These buggers don't go to war, they tell these buggers to go to war. And if we stop going to bloody war, game over. But we do. Ridiculous. That's part of becoming conscious.
Barry, thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure. It really is my pleasure.
I understand you have a wealth of experience with microwaves. Can you begin by explaining to us how you began your career in microwave technology?
Yes, of course. In 1960, I was in the Royal Navy, and I worked partly with the underwater bomb disposal unit, partly with microwave warfare, and some of the other time with radar. Microwaves were involved in all of those three different areas. So whilst I was in the Royal Navy, I trained in all aspects of microwave technology. And as anybody will tell you that's been in the forces, the training you receive is second to none. You practice it, you talk about it all day, you sleep it. So since 1960, I have been involved in all aspects of microwave technology. After that, a part of my job, because I had microwave expertise, was to question captured spies during the Cold War, when Russia and America were within seconds of global nuclear war. And microwaves by then were really sophisticated stealth weapons. And a part of my job was to find out from any spies who had been captured what the current knowledge was in that part of the world.
Wow, this technology is truly frightening. Really frightening.
Well, this is why it's microwave weapons were introduced from the 1950s, 60s, 70s to the present day. And this is another level of proof. They are so effective, if you're not in a hurry to get rid of somebody, they are so effective as a stealth weapon to beam somebody, and this has been done many times, and it's recorded. You can beam people you don't like as a government to give them cancer, breast cancers, neurological illnesses. You can choose what you want them to get.
You can choose?
Oh, you can choose. You can choose which pulse frequency you want to affect the brain with. You can choose the level of microwave irradiation and the speed that you want them to become ill. Yeah. It really is a perfect stealth weapon. And all you need to do is rent a house opposite someone you want to get rid of, or a group of people you want to get rid of, and just beam them. The most famous case during the Cold War was the Moscow embassy siege, where in Moscow they beamed the entire American embassy and gave them cancer.
Did they cause cancers in all the staff or in a lot of the staff? Or?
Most of the staff, most of the children got leukemia, the women developed breast cancer, the gentlemen developed cancers. I think after about 18 months the entire staff was changed, and then the following 18 months the entire staff was changed again. And by that time people realised what was going on, and they found that they were being irradiated by microwaves. And rather than say, oh, isn't this disgusting, what have we sunk to, they thought, isn't this wonderful, let's develop this for ourselves. And governments today are still perfecting microwave warfare.
Still to this day they're working on the weaponry?
Still to this day, 2010, they are still perfecting the pulse frequencies. It's got very, very sophisticated. The pulse frequencies, the how long they can transmit, whether it can be one country to another, bouncing the microwaves off the ionosphere, so you don't even have to be in the same country.
Bouncing the microwaves off the ionosphere, a lot of people won't have heard of this technology. You're talking about the HARP.
If you have a super transmitter, the microwaves, if you beam them, it's only a simple basic trigonometry. Yeah. But let's say I want to bring economic ruin to a country that grows all of the world's wheat. Right. Okay. All I have to do is beam microwaves up to the ionosphere, which is like an invisible cloud around the planet, an ion cloud around the planet. The microwaves going up at a set angle will reflect off down onto this country. And if I continuously beam the wheat in this field, or the cattle, or the sheep, I can reduce the immune system of the plants so that they won't be healthy and they will die, and I can stunt their growth, and I can bring economic ruin to that country. I can harm all of the animals, the cows, the sheep. It's so easy to do. You only have to push a button, and you can bring economic ruin to a country.
Which countries have this technology already available? Is it all the countries in the world, or just a couple of them?
It may not be a wise thing to say on a live broadcast, but you can take my word for it that I know at least 2 super transmitters in the world that have this capability, and there are probably more in areas that I do not have access to and I cannot go to. But I know there are at least 2.
I need to just go back a little bit now.
Of course, yeah.
Back to your early days in the military.
Mm-hmm.
This technology was used by the British government?
Oh, okay.
Sorry,
I can see where you're going.
It was
right,
used
okay.
by the British government against terrorist groups?
We have 8,300 papers. I have knowledge of 2,300 myself. And what the governments found was that you could induce by changing the pulse frequency, like Morse code, of the microwaves going into the brain and interfering with the brain. By specializing on the pulse frequency, you could induce psychiatric illnesses to the point where a psychiatrist could not tell if it is a genuine psychiatric illness or an induced psychiatric illness. So what you can do, theoretically, is you can target an individual's brain. They may have auditory hallucinations where they hear things, which is actually quite common with microwaves, or show signs of schizophrenia. For instance, 6.6 pulses a second can induce severe sexual aggression in men. So you could induce somebody to commit a really horrific sexual rape. So technically what you could do is have somebody committed to a psychiatric hospital or a jail for a crime just by somebody saying that they had a psychiatric problem whereby they didn't. Yeah. There is that. You can target other parts of people's bodies. You can target the heart and cause heart seizures. You can target the lungs and cause bleeding. You can target, if you're clever enough, some of the essential glands in the body that control all of the hormonal systems. So if you have dissidents or people that you don't like as a government, it's very, very easy these days to irradiate them and either have them wind up in jail or in a psychiatric hospital. And of course, there is no come on you.
Yeah. Now, these weapons that the governments have and are still using, are they more powerful than, for example, the Wi-Fi I might have in my front room, or my cordless phone, or a mobile phone transmitter?
No, in fact, they're actually, the power is slightly less.
Less?
The power is slightly less. The difference is, where you might use Wi-Fi, you might go in after work and do a couple of hours and then leave. And the Wi-Fi is going out in all directions. Here, they are targeting you probably with a beam. And it is on you all day. It can follow you everywhere you go, and it can target you when you're asleep as well. So you're really getting a concentrated dose. It's a bit like putting the light on in your house and sitting with the light, or have somebody follow you with a searchlight and beaming the searchlight on you all the time. So there is a difference between that. But in fact, the power can be less. It just takes longer. One specific paper from the government that lists all of the illnesses that you can get from microwave sickness, including severe neurological disorders. We have a government document that actually says this needs to be kept secret from the Western governments because it will affect the efficiency of the military, the weapons industry, and it will also affect industrial profit.
We have the government telling us that
this
technology is dangerous?
This is the United States Defense Intelligence Agency advising the Western governments to keep this secret so that they can protect industrial profit and military functions.
Kind of startling, really, isn't it?
It is so horrific that if it wasn't real, if somebody wrote a book on this, I would say this is so stupid, you could never make up a story like this. And it all goes back. It goes back to the 50s, the 60s and the 70s, when microwaves were found to be such a perfect weapon and so dangerous to the military that the United States Defense Intelligence Agency told the Western governments to keep this quiet. And they did. And this is why we have this. We have documents that show that governments pay people to experiment on people against their wishes. Well, not against their wishes, without even telling them. So, and we have all this information going back to 1976. Everything was known by 1976. Everything. We needed no more proof, no more research, nothing was needed. And we have the, drawn up in this country, the Nuremberg Treaty. And the Nuremberg Treaty was signed by all of the nations of the world. And it is a very specific treaty. And what it says is that no human being will be experimented upon without his or her consent. And before they give consent, they have the legal right to understand all of the implications, the health problems, the future health problems, and they have the legal capacity to say no. And where this is relevant here is that there is only one exception with the Nuremberg Treaty, and that is a doctor such as yourself may experiment on his or herself only. That is the only exception. It is section 5. So no human being is allowed to be experimented upon.
The future is planned. I've researched so many books. I've got a library of my own. I like paperback books or at least hardback books because they're permanent records of the past. And if you can't understand the past, you understand the present or the future. I've also been in the music business, heavily involved for years. And I saw how culture creation worked from the top and how generations were swayed into new fashions, new ideas. I've been following the histories of what's now called the New World Order for many, many years. And I tried to go into the books written by the big players, the technocrats themselves, those famous people like the Kissingers, the Brzezinskis and so on, the Huxleys, the Lord Bertrand Russells, who all worked for the same organizations. And I came to the conclusion, really, there was only one big organization, but with many subcategories. These boys tended to publish the world that they saw coming into view, and they wrote it in their own hand, basically. They told us where they were taking the world. And when you start studying these things about the age of 14, 15, or even younger, and reading their books, and you live long enough, you will see that the world has turned out exactly as they planned. This can't be coincidence. And who can really write up a wish list and make it happen globally, unless there is an organization very, very powerful, probably the only organization really on the planet, an organization that can fund all sides, all oppositions, and using this synthesis of conflicting parties, they can literally make the world come into view as they planned. They plan in centuries, and the astonishing thing is when you go into the United Nations, which was loosely based on the Soviet system, they plan certain parts of their agenda in 50-year plans, some in 100-year plans, and some even in 150-year plans for different aspects of it. The Russells, the Huxleys and so on, Brzezinskis, also use the same terminology with their long-term plans. And you've got to understand too that nothing in culture comes out from the grassroots. Even Plato talked about that thousands of years ago. He said that if it was a grassroots movement really coming from the people, then those in charge, the dominant minority, would lose control. Therefore, every change in culture, right down to fashion and music, and this was written 2,300 years ago, had to be authorized from the top and promoted from the top if it fitted with the continuance of control over the public. And these are sciences which were taught down through the ages, are still taught today to the big players, and they've used it to the full in the 20th century, now into the 21st century with the use of television, mass communications, radio, etc. Everything has been given to us for the appropriate time and stage in the actual planning. And for those who are coming into this kind of study, it's best to go into the books, as I say, written by the big players themselves. They love to boast. Kissinger's got lots of books out there, so has Brzezinski. These are probably two of the master players in geopolitics. Try to stay away from all the conspiracy books. They're also put out there in purpose, very fascinating books, but they lead you in circles forever without giving you the overall picture to the fact that every generation has a purpose up until this present time. And in a post-industrial era, these big boys have decided, and their masters too, that we are simply superfluous and they no longer need us. Hence, we have big foundations coming forward and organizations like the Optimum Population Trust who have decided to come out openly and demand that governments start radically reducing the populations. We are now the useless eaters, as Lord Bertrand Russell called us. Our ideas, our opinions on everything, our worldview, even to do with population and the fake view that we're overpopulated, is all projected to us by the mainstream media, working in concert for their masters. And we begin to parrot what we hear through repetition, and that's so important, as repetition with slogans and catchphrases. And once you hear it happening in your own local group, your milieu, then you know it's working. And the camera can make anything appear to be true. You'll see that in India, for instance, they always use the same streets of Bombay to make you think that you're massively overcrowded, and that's the impression people think of the entire Indian continent. The Indian continent is huge, with thousands and thousands of miles of forest where no one lives. It's the same in Africa too. China, being the model state for the world, for instance, put into effect the United Nations policy to the extreme with its population reduction and the movement of people off of the rural areas into cities. They said that years ago. Right now they're in the process of moving 200 million more people off into the major cities, and that's in the major newspapers. The cities appear to be crowded because everyone's being moved into them. In the Western world, since the 1950s, again under the term of urban sprawl and stopping urban sprawl, the Western countries also signed agreements to do no more building in the outskirts and of the major cities. All existing buildings have to be used or else knocked down and replaced with even higher ones. But regardless, with the immigration and the free flow of people now from third world countries, the Western countries appear to be overcrowded. And yet the UN's own statistics show, and sort of the national census show, that the Europeans, for instance, Canadians and Americans, who have been here for a couple of hundred years, are actually in decline. So the overpopulation problem is simply an image projected by the media as more and more people are crammed into the same cities and they bring more immigrants in to fill them. But I also realized the system of schooling, when I was going to school, was bogus. The histories were bogus, and I was very, very lucky to have access to very old libraries, town libraries. Some of them had reference books going back into the 1700s, written at the time. When you compared the histories I was being taught in school to the histories that were written at the time, they were completely different. Yet a deeper understanding of how geopolitics had been used in the past to even populate the country of Canada. London couldn't get immigrants to go off into the new colonies. What they did for Australia was to create so many laws that you couldn't help but break them, and poverty, and therefore stealing a loaf of bread to feed you or your family would get you deported to Australia with your family. That's how they populated Australia. Crime. They created the laws for crime. With Scotland, they had a rebellion, which could have been rigged, and I often think it was, and the whole of Scotland was punished. And they deported millions of the Scots off to the Americas, to populate the Americas. This is geopolitics in action. That's how it works. And whole peoples are often moved from their land because the elite masters want them elsewhere to be productive for them, themselves, the masters. When you look at the strategy for the US and Canada, again, long-term strategy, long-term planning, you'll find that the big corporations of their day, the Hudson's Bay companies, the Fraser companies, were given charters to own the land before Canada was Canada or US was the US. They were simply called the Americas. These are private international corporations that had the power of life and death over everyone who lived within their areas. The Queen or the King had a consulate in every country, Lieutenant General or Governor General, we call him. We still have one in Canada today who represents the Queen. They have all the powers over life and death of subjects under that governor. How they stopped rebellion in the past was they gave us an idea of what they called democracy. They knew from the Chartist movement in Britain, for instance, and elsewhere, other countries, people were demanding rights for the first time. And so once again, they gave us champions to speak on our behalf, which calmed the people down, thinking for the first time in history, the people were involved in their own destiny creation, and nothing was further from the truth. Because the planners knew that once you bring people into a country or a continent, create real wealth for them, and get businesses going, clear the land, drain the swamps, and so on, they can take it all away from you through laws 200 years down the road. And that's what's happening now. Long-term geopolitics once more. And if you think I'm kidding about this, go into the history books written at the time. They're still there in some of the libraries. And you can also go into the art of geopolitics. There's even videos on YouTube on Brzezinski boasting about how he set up the Taliban in Afghanistan. You'll see him encourage them to fight the Soviets at that time in the 1970s. And he actually says, yours is a holy war. This man, who obviously believes in nothing but himself and his own peer group, is encouraging other people to go and fight a holy war, a jihad. And he uses these terms against the Soviets, knowing full well, once it was set up and was backed by the CIA, that 10, 15 years down the road, it'd be a problem. And then they'd have to go to war with the very group they'd created to fight the Soviets. That's what's happening today. Long-term strategies. Well, that's how history has always been run. If you can go into the books where you find the British Home Office is mentioned, study the history of the diplomatic corps. Because the diplomats were spies. They would go into territory, set up embassies, collect intelligence data for future invasions. Their job was also to try and grab the rights of minerals, gold, silver, etc. across the planet, all natural resources, and find ways, long-term strategy, to either bribe it off the present rulers of those countries, or else create an ultimate war with them and simply steal it under the guise of occupation. We're living through a stage today, as I say, where this is all coming to a culmination. This is the post-industrial era. We're post-technical almost in the West. It's all done in other countries, all the technical stuff. And Brzezinski himself talks about the technocratic era, where the future will be for an elite with a highly trained bureaucracy underneath them and scientific elite who will not need the human labor that was needed in the past. Human labor that is excessive and is unemployed and is hungry is now a threat to that established elite. So now they're doing something which they can only do to the human species. They don't need to do this with animals. With animals, you just go out and hunt them and kill them. We are the only species that has to be convinced to allow ourselves, for the good of all, to be sterilized and bring down the population through abortion on one end and euthanasia on the other, under the guise to save the planet. And unfortunately, with the massive propaganda campaigns that are all over media in every country at the same time, with all the big foundations backing them with unlimited financing. Remember, the foundations are owned by the international bankers themselves. Then they can pull all of this off, and unfortunately it really is working. In kindergarten now, you walk into a kindergarten anywhere in Europe or Americas, and you'll see the rainbow inside every single one of them. You'll see all the terms about the world. Here's the globe, we're all global. And you'll see the green messages everywhere, and how sacrifice will have to be made to save the world and the planet and future generations of society. Sacrifice. You tie that together with the institutions that were comprised of the Fabian Society. He was a member of the Royal Institute for International Affairs. That's one society. The Council on Foreign Relations is also the same thing as the Royal Institute for International Affairs. They are what Thatcher and Professor Carol Quigley called the parallel government. They have told us what the future is going to be. Some of their members have even written books about the need to cull off massive amounts of the population by any means possible. And so we see this final stage being pushed as they convince us that we are the problem.
People do have preformed views which are not based on their own experience but simply what they've heard on the news media, and they haven't really paused to sit down and analyze these views properly. It's a sign of the madness and the criminal violence of our society that it dictates whether or not we may experience the healing effects of this plant. It is an extraordinary thing to call the consumption of marijuana a crime. It is a victimless crime, if it's a crime at all. An individual alone in his or her own house, sampling a plant which has been with humanity since the beginning of time, for that to be called criminal is insane. We live in an insane society that believes it has a right to patrol even our consciousness. Not only to tell us how to behave out there in public, but to tell us actually what to think and what to experience. And that's the main objection to marijuana by our government, is the effect that it has on consciousness. And they don't care that it is a fantastic pain reliever, which it is. They don't care about its wonderful medical properties. They just want to stop anybody experiencing these effects on consciousness. And no wonder our society is in such a mess, where we imagine we live in a democracy and yet elect governments that actually have the nerve to tell us what we may and may not experience inside our own heads without doing any harm to others. There is so much hypocrisy, so much humbug in government positions on these matters. Governments know perfectly well that the rules that they have made, the misery that they inflict on people's lives, don't get rid of these problems. If we really want to solve the problem of drugs, we need to open up the whole issue to broad public discussion, and we have to accept and admit that certain plant products, such as these ancient hallucinogens that shamans use, are entirely beneficial in their interaction with the human race. This is what governments are afraid of. They are afraid of a citizenry that is fully conscious. They actually want us to be unconscious. They want us to simply focus on this alert, problem-solving, competitive mentality that makes us good consumers and good competitors in the business place. But they don't want us to explore the majestic and amazing depths of our consciousness, because then we just might start asking questions that would be very uncomfortable for the powers that be.